Good evening. This is the scheduled meeting for the Community Preservation Committee of February 15th, 2023, 7 p.m. This is a meeting that we are meeting in hybrid format. There are members present here in our town hall, and there are certain members, at least one member of our committee, who's meeting virtually via Zoom. So we will proceed with our usual rules pursuant to the emergency order entered by then Governor Baker, allowing for a hybrid and meetings to comply with the requirements of the open meeting law. We're convening, as I said, in hybrid format. For those of you who want to participate by Zoom, the Zoom address is available on the posted notice of this meeting. Please note the meeting is being recorded. Some attendees are participating by video conference, as I've noted. Be aware that don't share your screen. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. The meeting material should have been provided to all of our members ahead of time, unless otherwise noted. And we'll go with our usual ground rules, but let me start by doing both a roll call and a tech check. I'll call each of your names and respond that you are present. Almost all of us are here in the person other than Mr. Dermody. I'll start. Joe Barnes.
Here.
Bob Dermody.
Here.
Laura Dorfman is absent. Reg Foster.
Present.
Dina Hannigan is also absent. Dave Harrow.
Here.
Gene McKnight is also absent. And Rick Zambone is absent. I'm Peter Pingator. I'm the chair and I am present. So we have a quorum. The first item on our agenda is chairman's updates. I think what I'd like to do is I have a number of things to talk about in connection with proposing to schedule another meeting for a week from tonight. And I'll fold in kind of the chairman's updates in connection with that, because it comes to a kind of a proposed agenda for our next two meetings. I want to rearrange the agenda just slightly and have our presentation on FY 2024-02, I believe it is, Seabed's Way and Cook Preservation to be the second item on our agenda after we hear from Susan Welby. Susan is with us. She's the representative that we have appointed or had appointed to be on the Active Recreation Assets Working Group, a group that has met a couple of times. And so we're going to have Susan summarize or bring us up to date, up to speed, and she's available for questions. Okay, so Susan, thank you for being here tonight, and thank you for taking on the responsibility of being our representative on this work.
Oh, you're welcome. It's an interesting committee, and we'll see what comes of it. But Active Recreation has held two meetings and one public hearing, and the public hearing was very well attended. There's a lot of people in town that want pickleball, an action sports park, off-leash dog areas. Some people want more bike lanes, you know, some bike stuff, but the three main areas are pickleball, action sports park, which is a skate park, and then off-leash dogs. And so we have a few more meetings scheduled. We're looking at all available spots in town to decide if all those items can be met, where and how, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. So why don't we start with some questions and comments? Is that all right? We usually go in alphabetical order. And so I call on folks, and if they don't have any questions, they pass. So I'm going to start with Joe Barnes.
Quick question. Are these going to be, do you anticipate these being new locations, or are they going to be splitting the pickleball, for example? Right now, Mills Field is being used for tennis and pickleball. Are you looking for additional space for something like that?
They would like to find additional space. The pickleball people want 15 courts, and the tennis people are a little bit leery of sharing their courts, which is a viable option,
Yeah.
but it would be better if they were separate locations. So we're gonna look at all of that and see where and how we can accommodate.
Were you at the meeting upstairs earlier?
No,
Okay. Field space was a topic that came up more than once, and
yeah,
trying to find space here along with additional fields for softball and baseball. You've got your work cut out for you, I think.
Right. But there's a lot of little, pickleball doesn't take up a lot of
No.
space. You know, like on a tennis court, you can have 4 pickleball courts, so. They're looking at creative locations for
And at
pickleball.
the present time, everyone's cordial and everyone's working together.
Oh, yeah.
Good. That may not last, but that's good right now.
It's an interesting group.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob Dermody.
Oh, yes. Hi, Susan. Thanks for the update. And just maybe this is more remind me, what's the time frame of your committee's work and the charge?
The time frame is to have a report ready before town meeting, so I think we're looking at April 25th as when we will finalize a report to go to the select board so that it's ready before town meeting.
And are you having any more public hearings? And if not, are there's a place where people can still send in email comments?
People can still send in email comments at any time. It's OTM, Office of the Town, OTM@edam.gov.
Okay,
And we will have a second public hearing. I think that's April 3rd to
oh, great.
update people on what we've found so far and how we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Reg Foster.
No questions at the time.
Okay, Dave Harrod.
Yeah, I got 2 questions. One, the tot lot of the Fazio. Has that been discussed in the at the meetings, and is that heading in any direction? Or?
As far as I know, the tot lot, they're looking at reducing the size of the tot lot. Right now, it's a big space, and the recommendation is for small children to make it a smaller space. So they want to reduce it by 2/3 and then look at the rest of the space as an alternative use. But, you know, that's just preliminary discussion.
Okay, and the second question about Claxton, where that tot lot was, is that under discussion, or it's just given everything that's going on, people kind of staying away from that?
Well, Claxton has come up for pickleball, action sports park, playgrounds, you know, more utility fields or whatever. So it's definitely in the mix. No decisions have been made on anything yet, but, you know, a lot of places are up for discussion. Like the Pollard tennis courts keep coming up for a variety of issues, the tot lot, variety of issues, Hillside School, the tennis courts at Mills, Newman, and the high school. Well, the high school will be dedicated to tennis, I think, once they're redone, because the high school tennis team needs those.
So when this group concludes, is it going to make some specific recommendations?
They're hoping
in
to.
the report?
They're hoping to make some recommendations to the select board about, you know, how to accommodate the requests that we're getting. And there's many requests. We've gotten a lot of really good emails, so I encourage people to send their thoughts along.
Good, thanks.
Okay, I guess for purposes of the CPC, my question is, do you have any sense as to when requests for funding will be made? What the kind of project timeline is once we arrive at what it is that we're doing, how many pickleball courts we're building, and how many off-leash dog parks we're building?
Well,
Do we have any sense of when the request for funding is going to be made?
I don't.
Okay.
You
And is
know,
that part of is that going to be within the scope of the responsibilities working
Right.
group?
You know, if all goes well, the off-leash areas won't cost the town a cent. You know, there's plenty of open space that dogs can be free to, play and interact with their owners and a few friends. But if they want to do a dog park, there's grant monies available so that we don't have to use town funds or a lot of town funds. There's a lot of options there. I don't know exactly what they'll be looking for CPC fund. I think the Action Sports Park might be the biggest expense and they might come to, but we really haven't talked about where the money will come
So
from.
my question would be, what is possibly going to be a request for funding and when might that come? So those are just kind of, I think, for
Right.
purposes. of
You know, it might,
CPC.
something might come in your next round of,
Next
requests.
year.
Okay,
I did think, one. You made me think of one question, if I may.
yes.
Yes, so is it within your charter and are you considering the actual acquisition of additional open space for recreation fields or activities?
That is part of our charter or charge. We haven't really looked at anything that's available yet. We've done a preliminary look at town-owned land so far, but at our next meeting, I think we're hoping to look at other possibilities. I don't know what's out there. So,
Okay, any other questions? No? Susan, thank you very much. And maybe you come back at some later point.
I'm available whenever you need me.
Okay, and we will be seeing you at the warrant meeting, which we have on our calendar. For the League of Women Voters.
That would be great.
Okay, good. Same
Thank
format
you.
as last year. Okay, thanks, Ken. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.
Next item is the presentation by for FY 2024 to NHA Seabeds Cook Preservation. And we have Margaret Moran on behalf of the Needham Housing Authority. Sitting next to her is Reg Foster, but we'll start with Margaret, right?
Well, let me also introduce Cheryl
Oh, I'm
Gosman,
sorry,
who
yes, Reg.
our Assistant Executive Director, who's here tonight as well. And I'm the Chair of the Needham Housing Authority. And yes, I'm going to turn it over to Margaret. Everybody should have a presentation that was in their packet materials that came from Cecilia. I think, Cecilia can put it up on the screen for us all to look at as well here. So take it away, Margaret.
All right, well, some of it will look familiar. We have the agenda similar to what we did last week. Go to the next slide. Just, a little background, skip on the Needham Housing Authority. I just want to highlight a couple of points on the Preservation and Redevelopment Initiative, and then we'll dive into Captain Cook and Seabed's existing conditions, and then funding application. So, still 75th anniversary, get that party started. The next slide, just, the Preservation and Redevelopment Initiative that the Housing Authority started. Last week, we talked really about item 3 on the list, which is the redevelopment of Linden and Chambers. But tonight, we're really focused on repairing and preserving the 46 units at Seabeds, which is the Housing Authority's federal elderly development over towards the Wellesley line, and then also the adjacent 30-unit Captain Robert Cook Drive family units. Both of them we'll see on the next slide. They share kind of a campus side by side. When you come in, Seabeds is kind of up in the kind of top corner of the site, and then you drive down a slight hill to where kind of an Adele and where the family units are located. Both properties were built for the Needham Housing Authority in the early 1980s as federal public housing, so they've been federal public housing since that time. The 30 units of the family, which are kind of clustered at the top of the site plan, are a combination of 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units. And then Seabeds, which is at the bottom end of the map, but at the top end of the site, are in 4 buildings and are all 1 bedroom units. And unlike Linden and Chambers, they're actually right sized generally for the load population between 540 to 580 square feet. not as undersized as, the conditions at the state public housing sites. Both of the properties are deeply affordable, which means that rent is based on the family's income, so it's calculated at approximately 30% of the family's income. So, if you have $1,000 income a month, your rent would be $333 approximately, whatever the third is, $300 a month. If you are at $2,000 a month, you'd be $600. It's kind of based on that percentage, but it makes them deeply affordable. And then the balance of the funding is made up by the federal government through a public housing operating subsidy that the Housing Authority gets. In addition to their annual operating subsidy, they also get a capital grant to help maintain the physical capital elements of it. But similar to the state program, the program has been underfunded by HUD for a number of years, not quite as bad as the federal program, but still not sufficient to adequately meet the capital needs of the property. So we've been in place going on almost 45 years. Many of the finishes are original. All of the building systems, with some exception at Seabeds, are also original. So you have original bathrooms and kitchens. The ventilation systems were what was code required in the 1980s, don't meet current code. The site, you'll see there's all kinds of issues with the paving and sidewalks and grades that need to be tended to. Seabeds in 2015, when we had that crazy winter, had a significant ice dam problem that got corrected, but in determining what caused the ice damming and all the damages, they found a construction defect in the buildings that actually continue at Captain Robert Cook. So there's some underlying condition at the family site that needs to be addressed, as well as just general rot and disrepair of the original building envelope system. And then there's a lack of accessibility at Seabeds. So even though the properties were built in the 1980s and there actually was in existence some handicapped accessibility codes, there's only a limited number of units and I don't meet current code around accessibility. And the Seabed site, and you have all of the units on the second floor. So half of the units, you have to climb a set of stairs similar to at Chambers, meaning those units are not accessible to folks, either for individuals to use or for them to have family members that gather. And then fire detection is again dated, and there's no fire suppression, fire sprinkler system in either Seabeds or Captain Robert Cook. And ventilation was really non-existent. Any kind of mechanical ventilation in either site, and particularly in the elderly site, you need to have some kind of air movement. And we're seeing evidence of kind of mildew kind of building up on the sites. And then just, the overall design and insulation doesn't meet current code. So it's higher and more expensive for the Housing Authority to operate, given the energy and efficiency, and also more difficult for the Housing Authority to keep residents comfortable as well during the colder or hotter weather. So if we go to the next page, we have a few photographs of conditions at Captain Robert Cook. Starting in the left, right is just, an existing condition. Kitchen, cabinets are original. The space considerations in the units are okay. Sometimes you end up in units and you feel they're really undersized and they don't meet the needs of today's families, but that's really not the situation with Captain Cook. But we do have finishes and that are just original and need to be replaced. As I mentioned earlier, site paving has substantial issues both on the roadway and parking lot areas, but also on the sidewalk. And you can start seeing, easily see the damage on for water, on the exterior envelope, both, at the top right picture, but also the middle picture below in terms of just kind of the age of the building envelope really needing to be addressed. Just the interior shot of the living room in the bottom left, and then the bathroom, again, original to the 1980s construction. And seabeds, similar, situation where, there's some building envelope work that needs to be done, not to the extent of Captain Robert Cook because of the 2015 emergency money that the Housing Authority received. Kitchens again date from the original installation in the early 1980s, as does the bathrooms. You can kind of see the site paving into the entryway, hallway entry, and just in general, the paving is in disrepair and needs to be upgraded. And as I mentioned, the stairs, half of the units are accessible only by a staircase, and the second floor laundries are not accessible for folks to use. Moving on. So really one of our first charges for New England Housing Authority was to work out a plan to reposition the federal properties, taking advantage of some of the tools that HUD has given, and recognition that they have not been providing kind of sufficient capital or operating funding for housing authorities. If you were to, get the amount of deferred capital work that's accrued across the country from all of the lack of investment, you'd be in the $40 billion range. And so each housing authority has kind of a backlog of work that need to be done because HUD has never provided, sufficient annual capital funds to maintain, and in the operating funds that they provide are just break even. The housing authority doesn't accrue any additional income that can then be repurposed to help pay for capital work under the public housing program. And so starting back in 2013, they created a variety of different programs through the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. RAD is kind of the word that's been out there that allows housing authorities options to switch from the federal public housing program to the HUD Section 8 program, basically from public housing to multifamily. And as part of that switch, depending upon what size your housing authority is and what the needs of your property are, you're able to get some percentage of what I call home market Section 8 vouchers that would be more equivalent to what the housing authority pays to private landlords to provide affordable housing to income eligible families in the private market. And so that's been what we've been looking at for Needham Housing Authority, with the idea of, bringing in additional federal dollars that will help the housing authority have better resources to meet its annual needs to run the properties, but also provide a path for the housing authority to make the reinvestment to bring the properties up to today's standards, and really kind of, as I sort of say, hit the reset button and allow housing authorities to extend the life of their properties by another 20 or 30 plus years. And so, that the program, we talked a little bit about it last week. We've been studying the different options available to the Needham Housing Authority, and we actually met on Saturday to review the final recommendation to the board to submit an application to HUD that would reposition or convert the housing authority's federal portfolio to one of the Section 8 programs to bring that additional income to the housing authority to allow it to do the, to better meet the operational needs of the property, but even more so to bring the additional income to help support the capital work of it. And so, we'll be spending the next number of months working on that actual application to HUD to submit and begin the process of getting the properties ready to actually convert. As part of that work, in terms of then figuring out which pathway that HUD has, that would be the best one available to the Needham Housing Authority, we used one of our Cambridge Housing Authority's house doctors, so architectural firms that we publicly procured already, so that they've gone through a process to work on a variety of CHA-sponsored projects. We had one of our house doctors, Dietz and Company, who's very experienced in renovation work, come and do a physical conditions assessment and report of each of the housing authorities, federal properties, so that we would have a clear understanding of what the capital needs are on the properties. You know, I think the report that was done in what, 2017-ish by Abacus Architects,
2019.
2019, had a good summary of the report, but didn't really tally up what the costs were, and didn't categorize the report in a way that would enable us to kind of assess which of the HUD tools and pathways were available for repositioning, for us to be able to figure out what was the best path to go down. So they've finished their 2 reports for Seabeds and Captain Robert Cook in March. We'll be having the final report for Hierarch Homes, and they've identified really the work that the site needs over the next, all 3 sites will need, but focusing on the 2 tonight, the 2 sites will need for to meet their capital needs over the next 20 years. And so as part of the funding application to HUD, we'll need to demonstrate how the housing authority will have the resources to effectively not only meet the operational needs of the property, but also how to meet the capital needs of the property over that 20-year period, so that we can be certain that the properties are set up to be more successful in their operations and in their conditions than what they were under the federal public housing program. So we'll be submitting the applications over the next, working with the Needham Housing Authority board and staff and residents to go through the preparation of the application period over the next 2 to 3 months. Application will go in, and then we'll start the process of getting the properties ready for conversion in terms of putting together the final financing plan, the final plans and specs for the improvements, and working it through the process that had set up for these types of conversions, with the schedule having us move towards construction by the end of 2024. So the chart here kind of gives you a sense of what Dietz and Company found on the physical needs of the properties, again, focused on Captain Robert Cook and Seabeds, using kind of HUD-defined terms of, they consider any work that needs to happen between now and 3 years as being immediate work, 3 to 10 years as kind of work you should be thinking about and planning for, and then just thinking about overall that 20-year viability, looking at the work that needs to happen to make sure that you can maintain that 20-year viability, that I think is a really important measure for housing authorities to meet. And one of the notables is, you can see, the 3rd column for Seabeds, that 10 to 20 is much higher than it is for Captain Robert Cook. And I think that reflects the fact that the housing authority did do that work in 2015 and 16 from the ice dam. So it did address some of the exterior envelope issues, not all of them. But then you're going to be thinking about in 2035-ish needing to do some refresher, additional work to ensure the building integrity of the building envelope at Seabeds. And so that shows up in that 20-year plan, so that you can't, even though you've done the work really in the last 8 to 10 years, you still need to be thinking about the fact that in your 20-year window, you're going to need to pick up that additional work to keep the property in good and up-to-date condition. And so, the way that these put together the numbers is they've got just the kind of the base construction costs, but then you have to do the markups of general conditions, general requirements, insurance, payment and performance bonds, permitting, and the like. And so that's what you have the subtotal of costs, and then you have the total cost with the markup. So when you look at the total cost of the markups, looking at the 20-year viability, you're talking about needing to plan for a capital investment of just under $24 million, which works out to about $310,000 per unit. And again, that's looking over a 20-year period. And so we've been working on, not only getting ready to submit the application to HUD to move the project forward, but then looking at what the financing plan would look like for the project. And, we estimate that we'll end up, with a overall financial transaction somewhere around $39 million. The project would be funded through a combination of low-income housing tax credits and some debt that the higher income would support. And then just when we do our pro formas, I always look to right-size the operating budgets for the property to make sure that the housing authority is covering its true costs with it. So, we'll be bringing up the costs to reflect, what those costs will be. So right now we're running numbers at $9,000 per unit for the elderly site, and then $11,500 for the family site, which we constantly check and confirm that those are the right numbers based on current market conditions or the needs of the property. And again, for this type of conversion, it really is, I kind of think about it as being behind the scenes activity for the residents, because the way the residents rents are calculated and the commitment of the housing authority to the residents really doesn't change. The rent calculation is exactly the same between the two programs, and how it calculates out a person's rent is again still based on the same 30% of the person's income. So switching from the Section 9 public housing program to the Section 8 program, fundamentally in terms of how a resident's rent is calculated doesn't have any impact, with the exception of a small handful of folks who are on ceiling rents. Housing authorities sometimes use ceiling rents to cap the rent that, I don't know, Cheryl, you don't know what your ceiling rents are, $1,500 or $2,000.
They're about $2,500
Yeah.
for a 2-bedroom.
Yeah, so your residents who are already paying ceiling rent may not experience an increase, but in other communities where I've worked, the ceiling rents the housing authority has set has been at $1,500, which for some of the higher earning folks may mean that they're only paying 10 or 15% of their income for their rent because of that cap, that ceiling. But the conversion to Section 8, the switch to Section 8 would remove that cap and set it up to a higher amount, which would still be, based on a person's affordable, income at 30%. But for the folks who've been benefiting from that ceiling rent and have been paying less than 30%, it can be an increase. But when we looked at your folks, there weren't very many higher earners who would be even subject to that. But I always kind of put that asterisk there.
We have the flat rent, and we do have a couple folks that are on it, not many, as we said.
Yeah. So moving on, so the actual we have a modest request for $241,052 for CPA. It is an eligible application under the category of preservation of housing resources. And it covers pre-development funds to allow us to move forward with securing the architectural firm needed to meet HUD's application requirements or financing requirements as we move through the process. The firm would create the construction documents and complete the construction pre-development costs required to close on the overall financing, which is actually HUD will approve your application, but but the actual conversion requires you to actually move forward with the construction, and you would convert on the day that you would close on the financing and on the day that you would be starting construction. Because HUD doesn't want to just give you the money without making certain that you've actually are stepping forward and actually doing the improvements. And again, we talked about construction starting at by the end of 2024. As I mentioned, we'll be working on submitting the initial applications by the end of spring. Approval takes about 3 months. That will put us on course to then do the rest of the documentation that HUD requires as part of the conversion to then be, ready to close on the project financing and start construction by the end of 2024. So the funding from CPA would be used to help underwrite some of the pre-development expenses that the project would incur as we move forward. And as similar, it would demonstrate the town's support for the activity, as well as reduce the housing authority, the stress on the housing authority on its own resources as it looks to move forward on its overall PRI initiative. So diving in a little bit more in the detail of the actual application is on the next slide. So this is the pre-development budget for Cooks and Seabeds, which would take us through construction bidding. So pre-development $637, $500 for the services, due diligence, a variety of geotech, environmental activity, some testing that they do, market study, which is part of the overall financing, a title report, just to make sure that, part of the financing requires a clean title, phase 1 environmental, CHA's development consulting services, and again, some pre-development legal fees, kind of comparable to what you had seen at Linden and Chambers. So that all adds up to $1,134,000. But we're not allocating 100% or requesting 100% of pre-development funds. We're really focused on the activity or the scope of the work and the physical conditions report that falls best into the category of preservation, because not all modernization activity at an existing affordable housing site meets the definition of preservation. And so if we go to the next slide, it talks about how we calculated that. So, eligible preservation costs according to the HCD policy. I think we uncovered some of this language last year, is around envelope repairs, electrical and plumbing upgrades, replacement of the fire suppression systems. And so those were the costs that we then pulled out or highlighted in the physical conditions report, compared that to the total budget, and came up with, the percentage of those types of costs to the total budget were just over 21%. And so that's how, we size the request, so that we're asking CPA to cover the 21% of the costs related to preservation activity, with the housing authority covering the balance of the cost. And I think we provided more detail on the next slide. So it identifies the preservation costs of the items to the total cost. It's a little bit higher at Cook, a little bit lower at Seabeds, but they blend to 21.25%. And then you can see that's how it then calculates into the CPA request. And it shows you each of the line items that we've identified in the dollar amount associated with it as it relates to work that would fall into that category of preservation. And so that we stay on the right side of use of CPA funds. So why is it needed? You know, answering some of your basic questions is, again, the cooks and seabeds are over 40+ years old. They're exhibiting critical deficiencies and need to have a comprehensive modernization. You know, the repositioning through the rental assistance, the RAD program that Needham Housing Authority will be pursuing provides a avenue for the housing authority to bring additional federal resources to the community to enable it to really have sufficient operating income to meet the property's needs in the future, but also to kind of, as I mentioned earlier, hit the reset button and really be able to do not the piecemeal modernization that it's been forced to do because of the way the capital funds come to the community, to the housing authorities, but to actually have the opportunity to do all elements of the work that needs to be done, and not only to do the work that needs to be done now and over the next 5 to 8 years, but also to plan for that future work and be able to demonstrate to itself, the housing authority, to the community, but to HUD that it has the resources to cover, the future repair needs of the property. And CPA funds, pre-development funds are the hardest funds for the housing authority to obtain and to kind of put together kind of that layer of resources to get to the amount that we need. The amount of capital funds the housing authority gets is, Cheryl, it's like under 250,000 a year.
Capital,
Yeah,
it's a little higher than
Little
that, it's
higher.
about 350, between 350 and 400.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's been, we've had two good years in dollar amounts, but it's been, typically, you have to run not only Seabeds and Captain Robert Cook, but also High Rock Homes Estate out of all of that money. And if you were to, calculate the physical needs, step 300,000 or 350,000 over, we've got $23 million worth of capital needs at the two sites. High Rock is even higher. You're talking about, potentially 30 years to actually assemble the capital fund money to actually do a lot of the work that needs to happen.
I can jump in here with another statistic too, which is 330,000, which is, again, only recently have we gotten that. There's been, extra money.
appropriation has been
Yeah.
great
Better
so
than
far,
less, but-
it goes
But
up.
if you divide it by 136 units of federal housing that we have, all of a sudden you're talking about $1,000 or $2,000 per year per unit. And if you just think of what you have to do to maintain your own house, new roofs and everything else, it's not been enough over the years.
Not enough.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it, because it really falls into that $1,500. And that's, again, not unique to Needham Housing Authority. Pretty much every housing authority falls between $1,300 and $1,800 per unit per year in capital funds. And, you really can't even begin to start addressing, in any kind of measurable way, capital work, which is why you end up with, kind of falling further and further and further behind. And really, this has been the program that HUD has provided, the conversion program is a real tool that HUD has provided to really allow housing authorities the opportunity to really reset their agreement with HUD, and doing so, then their ability to actually successfully maintain the property on an operational basis, because the Needham Housing Authority does not get $9,000 per unit or $11,500 per unit right now to operate. They operate on much less. And then you'll also have updated, highly energy efficient modern buildings that operationally will be less expensive to run. And the other benefit is, I always sort of think about the work as being protecting and preserving, actually saving the affordable housing that already exists in a community. Because if you don't get to the point where you can make these investments, eventually the units are going to fall into a level of disrepair and not be able to continue to occupy them. And the units don't change their characteristic, they continue to be deeply affordable, continue to be subsidized by the federal government. Again, it's switching which branch of HUD is doing it, but the deal with the residents in terms of how the rents category remains the same. And then, it would really result in, the CPA funds, when the entire transaction is put together and moves forward into conversion, will really leverage a lot of added money to the community, but really to those particular two developments in terms of righting the ship and really reestablishing, resetting their conditions. And Reg always likes me to remind you that it's a goal underneath housing production plan as well. So again, it will enable the properties to continue to serve the community for decades to come. And then, as we talked about last week, the overall repositioning of the federal portfolio has the ability to really support Linden and Chambers. We talked a little bit about the path that Housing Authority has selected will allow it to bank the federal public housing operating subsidy that it has. They won't leave the community, they could be repurposed to benefit the redevelopment effort at Linden and Chambers in terms of helping the Housing Authority bridge the gap between the rents it collects under the state public housing program and operating costs. Why it's doesn't quite bring you all the way to where you want to be. It really goes a good distance to filling in that gap, and when you combine that with other subsidy programs and resources, will enable Linden and Chambers to be a really an opportunity for the Housing Authority to move that money forward, but also in a financially secure and stable way for it to be an asset to the community for many years to come as well.
Okay, thank you, Margaret. Good presentation. Well done. So let's go, let's follow our usual course. I'll call on folks in alphabetical order and. start
Sure,
with Joe
I'm at
Barnes.
the top of the heap again, right?
You are, sorry. I could
Do you ever
one-
go opposite?
I did, one year I did that, because I kept calling Paul Albert first, and he just objected, and
Yeah.
so, but Joe is, listen.
And I
Joe's-
apologize that I was not able to make last week's meeting, so some of these questions might have already been answered on the other presentation, but curious, all of these units, all 76 are currently inhabited? Okay. What do you have for numbers on a wait list? Just curious.
Cheryl, what's our Seabed's wait list is what for
So
the elder
Seabed's
housing?
Way has about 100.
Yeah.
Resident folks on the waiting list,
And Cook?
Captain Robert Cook Drive has significantly more than that. It's based on the 2, 3, and 4 bedroom units, so it's a combined number. It's not a combined number, but it's a number based on those units, based on 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom, 4 bedroom units.
And when someone puts their name on the waiting list, what do you normally tell them, Cheryl, for, you can anticipate it's going to be a 8-year wait? Or
Yeah, our waiting list is still open. We haven't closed the waiting list. So we're still taking applications, and we do inform them that it is going to be about a 3 or 4 year, 5-year wait period. We do update our waiting list annually,
Okay.
and so information is sent out to people to let us know whether they want to remain on the waiting list.
Okay. All right.
And Linden Street and Chamber Street, the waiting list there?
So Linden and Chambers Street is part of the state program for waiting lists called CHAMPS. So people are able to apply for housing on that waiting list. And they can choose Needham if they like, as well as other towns. So Needham's waiting list for CHAMPS, I could be wrong, but I think it's about 4,000 people on the waiting
I think it's
list.
1,000 because I asked.
We
yeah.
extracted out people
Right.
that have indicated that.
It's
they-
huge, in
Yeah,
other
it's
words.
a ridiculous amount of people that are on state.
But we'll put that,
elderly.
that's a great
disabled.
question. We'll add it to the list of
Yeah.
things that we get,
Okay.
the current snapshot.
And then, and we can even add to that how many units turn over, because it's just really a handful.
Yeah.
How many individuals do you have in your maintenance department that covers
The
the?
entire portfolio.
Not-
Not enough.
I'm not feeding you these softballs, by the way. I'm trying to,
Cheryl, we were just talking about that this morning.
Yes, we were. We have about 4 people.
Four.
on,
And we're down.
We're down one. We're
two
down
if you
on
can.
a,
Two if you count Carrie too.
Manager, facilities director.
Yeah,
have these units been maintained as well as they possibly could over the course of time?
Band-Aids, baling wire and scotch tape, yes.
But they've been addressed. People have been.
No, we fall behind every year. Yeah, we do as best with the money we can.
Okay, but the 4 people that are working
Yeah,
all
oh,
the
yeah,
time doing that.
absolutely.
That's my question.
Yes,
Yeah, I mean, given the limitation of the resources that Needham has, they really do an exceptional job at trying to keep the units up and operational and running. It's just, they can't do some of the fundamentals
Right.
like, when they go in to get a unit ready for occupancy, they're putting, duct tape,
Yeah.
to get things to
Okay.
function where, somebody else might put in a new counter. They're trying to get another life cycle out of that
Yeah.
same counter, because they don't have the capital to actually do it. But the workmanship and the commitment to the work has been exceptional. And, they're, the person who just left, who was their director of maintenance, I thought was, I get to see other housing authorities, and I thought he was really well served by him.
Okay, well, maintenance is a word that is used all the time with the applications and we're happy to fund things. We just want to be sure that they're maintained over the course
Yeah,
of
you
time.
don't want to
So,
spend money and then
Yeah, you
see
don't wanna be
them
throwing
fall
it away.
apart. Yeah.
one more question here about what kind of oversight does HUD have once they become involved? Do they have someone almost on site during an entire project, or is it just a reporting process from your end, or is there physical presence of HUD so that they are sure that they're getting their money's worth out of their investment?
So for public housing, they come out annually to do an inspection and a review. When it switches over to the Section 8 program, it will be that units will be independently inspected, by a third party who will come in and determine if the housing authority is maintaining them up to an acceptable level, and if not, then they file a report. And if the items don't get corrected, then potentially HUD has the ability to withhold some payments from the
Okay.
housing authority.
So they provide the money, but they do carry a heavy stick. They could anyway.
They could, yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
but they really do rely, particularly with the transfer to that third party inspector to confirm that the units are in being maintained in decent condition.
Okay.
and then Joe, if I can jump in from give you your last week's question, what about on the state side when we do the Linden Chambers project, the same question from Joe?
So, if we are able to utilize the vouchers, the operating subsidy, the federal operating subsidy, then HUD would again play a role in the oversight of the units that have those subsidy dollars. But, DHCD does come out annually as well to review
Okay.
state public housing. And then, when you're seeking funding for capital work, then they have a review architect that reviews the plans and specs to make certain that they are appropriately being designed, not being over-designed, but not being under-designed.
Yeah.
Meet all of the accessibility requirements and best.
Well, I suspected that would probably be the case, but you always want to be sure that you're not just funding and then walking away. You want to be sure that there is someone oversight. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
So, okay, we have Bob Germany next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Sure
Yes,
can.
Good. Thank you for the presentation. Page 31 of the slideshow, the bottom line. If we could go back to that, please. Yeah, right column benefits, third bullet point, CPA funding will result in a 39.9 million preservation project. Could you take us through that? Where the 39.9 number comes from and how 240,000 turns into 39 million?
So the biggest number there is, the construction number. So at we have to demonstrate for the 20-year viability, the ability to finance, $26 million worth of construction.
Okay.
And then on top of that, you need to have reserves, so one of the things that's a requirement of the financing, and I think just good practice, is you actually have an operating reserve so that if for some reason the property experiences a hiccup or Congress does something to lessen the income that the property were to receive, the housing authority would actually have a 6-month operating reserve that could help it weather such events. On top of that, you have a replacement reserve. Then you have, architectural and engineering costs, developer fee, or, project oversight, and financing fees, and potentially, depending upon the scope of the work and how impactful it is to residents, relocation. And did I say financing fees too for the lenders and the like? As to qualify, if I go too far inside baseball, let me know. But to qualify for low-income housing tax credits, you have to use bond financing for the construction. So you have construction loan interest that the project has to incur to actually qualify for the tax credits that then make it a little bit more expensive than what you would do if you were doing something more conventionally financed.
Okay, thank you, Mary. That's helpful. And just the way it's written, and you may guess I'm comparing it to Linden Chambers. We're trying to get money to get more, award money to earn other money, but this says it will result. So that's a done deal. There's no risk involved here.
No, I mean, you put your application together and HUD, moves them right along. They really are trying to encourage lots of housing authorities to really consider these repositioning strategies as a way to attack the repair and reinvestment needs that are happening. So, you're on a more predictable path. But both of them, it's hard to say that neither one of them would never not proceed. I think, what we talked a little bit about last time, particularly for Linden and Chambers, that, if you didn't get funding for the new units from DHCD in the first round, you'd go to the second round. The difference between the two is that you don't need any soft DHCD funding for seabeds and Captain Robert Cook, so you don't have to go into that competitive funding round, because you're really just relying upon tax credits and the debt that the property can support with the vouchers, and you're not tapping into other DHCD money that is a little bit more competitive and can take a little bit longer to get. So these type of repositioning deals tend to come together quicker than the Linden and Chambers one, but a good deal always goes forward. It's just a matter of timing.
Okay, thank you.
Dave?
Oh, yeah, thanks. So I just have a couple questions. Like, this work is gonna be done over a 20-year period, is that correct?
Yeah, you would try to maximize as much as you can do. I usually try to do I don't like to do anything early, but I'd like to try to do up to 8 years, 9 years of the scope of work, because the way the tax credit program works is you get, for every dollar you spend, you get 50 cents of equity from the investor, which you don't have to pay back as long as you run it as deeply affordable housing or affordable housing. So, you know, if you do it in the out years, you don't get that same kind of equity. You know, you're gonna be using your replacement reserve money itself. So I tend to, you know, make certain that, you know, and again, I don't like to do anything premature, but I tend to make sure we have that right scope of work that's maximizing the equity dollars that would come into the deals. Because, you know, that's money that is beneficial to the financing and to penciling out the deals. And it's the money that, unlike, you know, a debt, you don't have to pay back because, you know.
So there's an advantage to slow play this as opposed to getting it done as quickly as you.
No, I think, I mean, the idea would be to get as much done upfront as you possibly can, you know, and to maximize that number. You know, and I mean, I really try hard to make certain that there's nothing that needs to be done in the first 15 years of the life of the building. And
So-
again, I try I don't want to throw away something that's good, you know, but I want to make certain that I really maximize the longevity of the renovation work and to try to do as much upfront as I possibly can.
You know, because I was just trying to understand what, you know, what the limitations, the limiting factors are on the schedule. You know, because you had this laid out in like three tiers
In terms of,
of the capital expenditure.
yeah, I mean, we do that because, you know, that's the way HUD likes us to look at it. You know, and it helps us figure out what HUD, you know, what pathway HUD has given for these repositions that might be the most advantageous financially for the housing authority. But then when it comes time to actually put together the actual renovation work, you know, it's like, so, you know, sometimes I've come into a situation where the work we're doing is extensive enough that the residents are gonna need to be out of their unit for 5 days. Well, the minute I've taken them out of their units for 5 days, what else can I do that ought to be done
Right.
that would benefit from them being out? So, you know, like one time we realized we were gonna have to, you know, just to get the flooring done, we were gonna need to, you know, have people out of their units for a number of days. So then we said, well, that's a good time to then really gut the bathroom and get the bathroom done, you know, during that period. And so instead of being out 5 days, they've been out 8 days or something like that, that you try to maximize the, you know, if you're disrupting somebody, you try to maximize them, what you're putting back into the unit so that, you know, you don't have to come back sooner and disrupt them again, but, you know, and then incur all of those added costs of mobilization and the like. So you try to be strategic and thoughtful in that way.
Yeah, so sort of a related question is, you know, as this gets stretched out in time, so it's not gonna be 20 years, might be 8 years.
Yeah.
I didn't see where you had any kind of escalation. in there.
If you actually read the report, there's a lot of escalation in
There
there.
is.
And so in the numbers that we presented, we actually took some of the, you know, to look at it, you know, we took some of the escalation out, but when we put together the financing plan, if we think it's gonna be done in year 10, we're gonna escalate for that cost. And you can see, you know, what the escalators are in each of the reports and the out years, you know, your escalation is really getting up there.
Oh, yeah,
But yeah, no, you have to be mindful of that.
okay.
And the same thing, like when I size the replacement reserve, you know, you can't just think about construction costs. Because you're not gonna be able to do construction without potentially some design work from the architect or engineer. And so you need to, in addition to covering the actual construction costs, you're gonna wanna include some percentage for any design work that you might need in addition to the actual construction.
So I think I read in the report that this project would not require any zoning change.
Correct, it's just a straightforward rebuild of what's there.
So the thing that will determine the schedule is basically the funding.
Correct,
you-
correct. Yeah, you don't have the uncertainty of zoning here because, it's existing non-conforming. You're not, the renovation work wouldn't be making anything worse that would trigger any kind of review and the like. So, that really does take away, a big uncertainty of schedule. It really is about how fast can you work with your architect and engineer to
Right.
put together.
And you said
documents.
before that, relatively speaking, the funding of this is less risky than.
Yes,
the
yeah,
other.
much easier
It's
to,
significantly.
Yeah,
It's
much-
a different.
much
Yeah.
easier, when you don't, when you really, when you're not dealing with zoning and you're not dealing with new units and, the competitive money, it really is, for the state public housing, it's just that the state side doesn't have, right now they're a little flush because of some of the federal resources from COVID, but typically they're much more constrained. And so what you're accessing for a federal project is your ability to access them is much easier and much more predictable and, much more certain.
Just one last question. Just to clarify that you're currently operating on a big maintenance deficit or capital deficit. Right?
Yeah.
You get $1,000 a year and
Per unit.
the actual cost might be more like 5,000 or more.
Yeah, so like, you just been awarded last Saturday a roof job,
That's correct.
and that was 400.
The
50,000.
job total was 400 and, I think it's 69.
Yeah, so it was, a year and not quite a year and a half of the entire allocation of the Housing Authority's capital fund.
So-
For one building component.
Exactly right.
And that's a structural issue.
It is a structural issue.
So is that going to change with this project?
Yeah, because what you're gonna be doing is you're not gonna, one, you're no longer in the public housing world. Two, you're gonna be putting aside money for a replacement reserve. So that you're gonna, I like to talk about it as you'll have more control of your destiny than what you've had now, because one, you'll have reserves, like we talked about that operating reserve, but you're also gonna be projecting for replacement activity or needs. You're gonna know, all right, if I do the roof in year one, I gotta be ready to do the roof again in year 25 or whatever the right year is. And you're gonna show that on your capital schedule. And you're gonna need to show, all right, how am I gonna make sure I have enough money in the bank to cover that cost? Meanwhile, you'll be paying down your mortgage, so, you'll be creating some equity over time that you could then, do a refinance, so that you're setting the property up so that you have a much more predictable pathway to funding in a way that just hasn't existed in the public housing program. And you have the Section 8 vouchers that will be, available, and they don't go away. They self-renew every 15 or 20 years. And, when they are gonna pay substantially more than what the public housing program has been paying, almost almost double.
So I want to just add a thought on this, just by way of example, on this roofing project we just approved. So when you're awarded capital funds, you have up until 5 years to spend them, okay? And what you have to do is save up the money. So if you have a $450,000, $60,000 roofing project, we're using this extra money Cheryl just referred to that we've been getting for the last couple of years. And we have to, if we don't obligate it, in this case, by February 23rd, then we have to give it back. Because we're using 2019 money that we've been saving up over the years.
It
And
wasn't
20
enough
Yeah,
when we got.
Wasn't it? That was only
the
300 of
contract.
1,000 of it.
Previous year.
and if you want to see, and what we're doing, if you want to drive through Captain Robert Cook and just drive through and look at the roofs, you will see moss instead of roofs all over the place. And they're 10 years, overdue for being replaced at least. So, it's just been
I understand.
I couldn't resist saying that because it's so hard.
I'm finished, thank you.
You should, I don't, you probably have seen the units before and the developments before, but it's always good to go and look at the site. You do drive through. All right, Margaret, thank you. As I said, very good presentation. Let me just jump right in. The construct with the low-income housing tax credits, is it kind of similar to what we discussed last week, where we've got an investor?
Yeah.
And you're gonna make sure that, and with the plan being that once the investors are taken out after X number of years, is it 20? Is it
It's somewhere between 10 and 15
Okay.
years.
that the property will get turned back?
Yeah.
Do we have site control the whole time?
Yeah, my recommendation is always that the housing authority ground lease the property to the tax credit investor so that the housing authority maintains the ownership of the land.
I think we have to do that for CPC. That's all, right?
Yeah.
I think you need site control.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
that's
that
what-
to me is like, the most critical element.
Right.
As I mentioned last week, I really, work hard to, put belts and suspenders
Mhm.
to make certain that the property stays in the, it comes back to the public realm.
And the housing authority then would be the management company, the manager of the
So
property?
how it typically works is that, the tax credit investor is in, they want the economic benefit of the tax credit. And so then they would contract back to so the LLC would be 99.99% owned. We usually put a 0.1% of the housing authority entity in the other position. The housing authority entity is the managing member of the tax credit LLC, so they make the day-to-day decisions. And then the tax credit LLC contracts back to the housing authority to do the management and maintenance aspects of it.
Okay,
And so, what the investor is going to be kicking the tires of the Needham Housing Authority to make sure that Needham is up to stuff to be able to feel like they've got a good partnership there.
and they, I guess, under the management agreement, the housing authority could be removed.
They could, I always sort of say, I always try to put in there that it can only be removed for cause and that there has to be a cure period.
Right.
So, I try my best. When I talk to residents about it, and Cambridge residents, when I say, if it ever gets to that point, you probably want us to be removed. But hopefully it never gets to that point, and you try to put in there, notice and cure
Right.
procedures in there, but I would be lying to you to say, no, you never. You didn't.
Right, so that's just a risk. I sometimes ask these questions so that people
Yeah,
just.
and that's why, I also wanted to just say, like that, as much as you might want to make a deal, the investor has to be confident that you're going to be successful because they're investing in your property, but they're really investing in the quality and the production of the staff, of being able to make sure the property's maintained, that the rent calculations are done correctly, all of those kinds of things.
So, all right, so now my understanding, just on my macro question is that the only request that's going to be coming before CPC with respect to the redevelopment and repositioning of this development is this request.
Is the
Because
pre-development, yeah.
from here, you go right over to funding through the low-income tax credit formula. There's not much of a layer cake on this.
No, this one doesn't have the layer cake of
Yep.
Linden and Chambers, thankfully.
Right.
And again, it really is reliant, as I said, on the tax credit equity and the debt as being the drivers. And, we put together countless deals where we haven't used any CPA money in any other community other than pre-development resources. And I have every reason to believe that would be the case here as well.
Okay. So the other question that I have is if we go to, I don't have the page number, but maybe it's,
What's the title?
well, it's page 11 of the 11th slide.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so then there's a reference to pre-development sources, the percentages, and then where we're getting basically, CPA is putting in 21.25%, I understand the calculation. other sources, NHA reserve, capital fund program, pre-development loan. So can is there anywhere in that packet where we actually have the details of that? You know, what is the,
What would be the,
what, you know,
what the aggregate of all of that might be?
yeah, what are, you know, so.
I don't think we've answered that.
And so, because it kind of begs the question that, you know, why, yeah, I'll be kind of just asking the tough question. Why are you asking for anyone? Why can you possibly fund this through the NHA Reserve Capital Fund Program, pre-development loan?
Is it-
So and that is like, what is the level of necessity of this money?
Yeah, so there's not, I mean, there's not a sufficient amount of capital fund program, so we can show that. And then, the NHA reserve, we talked a bit about. what
Oh, so that was, the NHA Reserve
Is
is the
the same.
developer's reserve.
Yeah, but remember that can't be spent on anything, whereas, on
That-
either the state or the federal side here.
It can be spent on anything.
Yes, but it's the state side where we're hurting,
I
most.
understand, yeah.
Yeah,
But
the
I just-
capital fund can only be spent on there's more money there and more need, and,
But I just need to know.
Yeah, you need to
we
see
can
how
break
to
it down.
now.
I need to see that. I mean, I think that, there is, for this kind of request, this, in my mind, it kind of clearly fits within funding by CPC, by the committee, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, and it's, on terms of eligibility, and there are all sorts of reasons, subjective factors why it fits. But at the same time, I just want to test the necessity of that,
Yeah,
just
so
in terms of being
we'll-
a fair broker of information,
So
that's all.
we'll, present the budget for
Yeah.
how much in the capital fund, how much.
Right, okay. And then my other fellow members asked the other questions that I had. And I also think that, I just want to point out that these will continue to be deeply, these units are going to be deeply affordable units, or although we are going to, even though we're kind of lifting that cap, do
They
they
still
still?
would be at 30% of a person's.
Oh, yeah, that's
income.
right. No, but without a cap.
That's the
Okay.
key.
So it's
you know?
always going to be defined as 30. as
Yeah,
deep-
yeah, and that's to me is the key to to deeply affordable. I think we talked about this last week where, the rent the resident pays varies based on their income. But it never exceeds the 30% of their income.
Right.
Where, a tax credit unit, it doesn't matter what your income is, the tax credit rent is the tax credit rent. And you either, pay 40 or 50 or 60% of your income, or you pay, close to, the way a tax credit rent works out, it's 30% of 60% of area median income. So, if you're between 50 and 60%, you're close to that 30% level. But if your income's much lower, you're really stretching and paying a higher percentage of your income. And then you can't be over 60% to be eligible. So then you don't ever in a situation where you're below 30% of your income unless you can stay in place if your income has gone up.
But I'm a little,
Yeah, sorry.
no, it's okay. I'm a little, it's hard, it's hard to, it has to wash over me a lot of times too. But that's not our
No, that's
circumstance
not,
here,
because
even though we are being funded through low income.
right, but you have the subsidy dollars
And we have.
for
subsidy.
every unit.
Okay, so. we have
From the
a subsidy.
feds,
From
when you
the
do the
feds.
repositioning.
Yeah.
Right,
You
It's
get
my,
a Section 8 voucher.
yeah, it's
for
my
each
favorite, it's my
Okay.
favorite, putting a subsidy with the tax credit unit is, the maximum way to achieve your maximum affordability.
okay, so
And-
everybody understand that? That's good. That's an important
Yeah.
aspect.
And we should do the one additional sentence, which is we get a 1-to-1 Section 8 voucher, if you will, for each, a project-based voucher for each unit. And it throws off 108 now reusable subsidy units that can be redeployed
Those public housing.
That
to
part I don't-
Linden Chambers and to,
I don't want to, I guess I could ask that now, but maybe I could ask that offline, which is, I don't quite understand how we get the 108 extra
it's
units.
80%.
By doing the,
It's counting High Rock Homes Estates in the mix.
okay,
So it's at
right.
80% of 136.
so it's 60, it's 48, and I do the math, 48 times that.
You know what?
Yeah,
Why don't we
60,
do
it's
that
60
now?
units, it's 60 units after this one.
Okay,
60 off of Seabeds and Captain Robert Cook, and then 48 off of High Rock Homes.
okay. All right, so. Can you just bear with me, because I have some other tabs, that's all, I just want to make sure that I cover my questions. Sorry about this,
No
guys.
worries.
All right, let's just adjourn for now. I think that covers it for me. There was a question that Jean emailed Cecilia and me regarding zoning. And so what we'll do is we'll put that in the stack of questions that people may have, and you can,
This one.
It's on the list we sent out earlier.
did you see the question?
I didn't see the question, but we heard her voice the question last week.
There's another question regarding zoning on this parcel. It's pretty, so let's just,
Yeah.
okay, let's just
Yeah,
put that
I'll
out to
forward
you.
it along.
It forwarded along
Mhm.
and, okay. So, here's what I was gonna propose next, if this is okay, which is, I think that we've got a lot to do between now and I'm kind of thinking of March 8th, which is when we have to make our first report to the finance committee. So I thought, and we have people who are absent, some people are here tonight. I'm worried about them. I'm hopeful that we can all reassemble again next week, or close to all of us can reassemble next week. But someone pointed out to me the next week is school vacation week. So for example, Dina may not be available.
I've got a conflict.
And okay, but that's good, because it supports my theory, which is that maybe let's just touch on some questions, just at least get the questions out for the Linden Chambers. So any additional questions? So that we're assembling that information. So Joe's here now. He wasn't here last week. He won't be here next week, but he's here now. So he may have some questions. So let's just, I think, and what I anticipate us doing tonight is really just doing this next exercise, which is this, get these questions out. And I want to kind of better articulate my expressed concerns from last week, just so I can get those focused, because I'm concerned that not everyone understood them. I'm concerned that I don't want to send you off on doing things that I don't want to send you off on what my dad would say, a wild goose chase. So I just want to have a little moment to talk about that, and that'll maybe inform us for what we're doing for our next meeting or for next week. This is entirely up to you, because you're the proponents. It would be nice if we had access to Margaret, maybe just by Zoom, if that's possible. But
Well, so that would be the 20th, Wednesday, the 20th at 7. Is that
it
what
would
you're
be,
saying?
no, that would be 22nd.
22nd.
So I'm in DC that day. I have a HUD meeting, but I could join remotely.
Okay, thank you. So then I would just want a little bit of time to now talk about 01. And I don't know that we could just quickly summarize 03 and 04. I want to touch on the discussion on consultant, and then the other issues I think we can address next week, updates on CPA plan. And there are a couple of other items that I wanted to put on the agenda for next week. Okay, update, I'll tell you what they are. Update on the CPA plan, because we have a late entry by Jean McKnight on amendments to the community housing section. Hopefully we'll have something from Park and Rec by next week, to give them a deadline at the end of February. Maybe we'll get something from Concom. I'll talk to you about that, but maybe that they don't feel the need to contribute anything. That's kind of what they're saying. And then we can review the finances, the financial memo that Dave Davison gave us. And this is your first turn, Dave Harrer, going through this. And actually that memo is probably a good first introduction to the very esoteric financial construct that we deal with at CPC. But if we start with the memo, then you'll flip over to the 5-year plan that we have, and you'll be up to speed. Okay. So next, and I feel confident that I can handle the memo and explain what we have to do on the financial side based on Dave's memo. So those are my proposed agenda items for next week. Then on the first, we have it's Claxton Field. It sounds like they're going to make a presentation. Sounds like that they may be making a presentation, even though, and with the hope that we're going to consider it, potentially fund it, or continue it, put it on the table until next October. And what I'd like to do is bring in.
May I interrupt and said, do we need Margaret or?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask Mark a couple of questions about O1.
I'm just trying to be.
I know, I'm sorry about this. Okay, so what I wanted to actually allow Joe to ask questions about O1 to Margaret, and then I just had a couple of questions for Margaret for O1 too.
Right.
Okay, thank
Well,
you.
I'm gonna stand down, okay? I'll reach out here. I don't have a particular question right now. It's feedback I've heard indirectly, but I'd just as soon take care of that with our committee.
Okay.
Not right now.
Well, I guess I could do the same, but let me just I want to clarify from last week, because Margaret was here and I threw out a couple of ideas. But so my express concern last week was that the CPC was being asked to fund all of the pre-development costs for Linden Chambers. And so I expressed concerns about that kind of equity and fairness of that. And the necessity of that in light of the fact that there are some other funding sources that could be used. But then there was another piece that I think kind of got lost in the sauce, if you will, which was this was the thing that really concerns me is that I saw that this request, the O1 request, as a new financing plan, a change from what the justification and was made for last year for funding. So, and I think I pointed this out, that if you go to the Q&A for last year's application, it's on site. The representation made is that the 1.386 thousand funds, and I'll read it to you, will enable NHA to leverage 1.25 million of ARPA funding and 1.5 million of Partnership for Growth funding to complete all pre-development tasks for Linden Street and Chambers properties. Then it goes on to say nearly all of the construction funding will come from non-Needham taxpayer sources. That I understood, and actually feel pretty confident that I represented to the Finance Committee, that 1.386 thousand would be used with 1.25 ARPA and 1.5 million in partnership growth to cover all pre-development costs. That's how I read it. That's what I understood. And that's what's up there on our website, and that's what we represented to the Finance Committee. So my concern is when we go before Finance Committee on the 8th, they're going to say, this is a new financing plan. Why are we hearing about this now? And I think I'm for this project. I want to see this project succeed. I'm concerned about that the O1 based on how it's being positioned. I don't want to, and it's not my role to try and give you a solution. I know, and that's why last week I threw out some ideas. I don't think it's fair to try to workshop it. I don't want to substitute my judgment for yours, but I'm telling you that I see that as a pretty serious matter. So it may be, it's also, to be frank, it's forced me to say, we need on our end, on the committee side, we need to have some expertise on our side So to ensure the success of the project, to feel comfortable with the funding and the financing plan. And I think on the Housing Authority side, I feel very confident that the town and finance committee are going to be at the point now that before they make further investments in it, in the project, they're going to want to see a clear path for how the construction of the project is going to happen, the balance of the project. So that's why I brought it up last week, which is I think we need to talk about this now and have a discussion now about what the actual commitment from CPC is going to be, or you're going to ask, or it can be, and what it can be for the Linden Chambers project. So that's kind of, I hope I clarified my concerns and I, kind of identified the issues. It may be that, I don't think you should answer this now, but it may be that it's, the path forward may be to consider bringing it before the CPC in October. I don't know if that works for you or not, but that would give us time to have to make sure our due diligence is done on our end with a consultant, and to work for you folks to work through the issues of, are you going to be doing a lit or in terms of zoning, for you to meet with the board of selectmen. I think maybe even the finance committee. I'm not certain how that works. I don't know, but I think that this may be one of those circumstances where you have to consult with them. And so I'm worried that you're going to be behind the curve in dealing with and getting the support that you need for the funding by going forward on this cycle. So, but those are kind of my expressed concerns. And I think, you don't need to, I don't want you to respond tonight. And again, I want to reiterate that you've got a tremendous amount of support in the town and on this committee. But I think, so I want to see the project succeed, and I want to see you guys put it in the best position possible for it to succeed. And I'm concerned that the application as it sits now is not going to get you there. I'm worried about it.
You said, yeah, I'm not being silent to that. Appreciate your worry. So obviously we will take a look at that. And I think the one thing I would respond to is we put a lot of effort in the last few days, sending that list of questions that arrived in Cecilia's inbox sometime mid-afternoon and so forth. What would be most useful for us is if everybody looks at it tomorrow and wordsmiths it, anything is not right, there are questions, that concern is in that list already.
It is.
Yes.
Okay, I wasn't.
No, I'm just saying, the most helpful thing is if all the committee members, the ones that are here and the ones that are not here, the ones that, Joe is here this week, but not last week, they take a look at last week's Linden question. We got a pretty good going, didn't we?
Yeah, I left saying I felt like I had given a doctoral dissertation defense, which I thought is a compliment.
That's what she said.
To all of you.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
I felt like the
It was
due
a compliment.
diligence was exceptional, and I, appreciate the thoroughness of the questions, and I felt like that's great. That's exactly what the process should
And we
be.
don't look at this as a threat, and we look at this as extremely helpful.
Yeah.
It's prepping us for what may be coming down the road. And so if our wish would be some deadline to get to Cecilia by, as soon as possible, the turnaround on those, set a deadline, say by the 20th, maybe if there's 22nd, by the 22nd, that, everybody who can, who's not on vacation until that period of time, gets Cecilia all the edits, and she puts them all together and sends it to us. But then, because the 22nd is not that far away from March, all of a sudden. So we really need to have that list of questions sort of vetted and say, yep, that's the ones that we asked last week, as clarified by you this week, was added to by anybody who's not at this meeting this week. And if it's helpful, we'll also turn around the questions that were asked here, on the seabeds of Cook, a lower scale questions, but we'll turn that around. And, as long as we can get a prompt response, we can keep up with the looming schedule with the finance committee coming up here.
Okay. I think the 22nd is the outside date. So I think, can we all agree, like, let's get, I'm sure that you folks turned around a good draft. You sent it to me tonight before at 4:30 or so. I can read that.
I don't think, you got a copy, but nobody else got a copy.
Oh, is that what
Yeah.
happened?
I didn't get to
Liaison.
send it to the whole group. Usually, if there's any last minute things, that 5 to 7 time period is really helpful, and didn't have that today.
All right, so the 22nd is a week from today. And that's, can we meet that? Is reviewing their detailed, what they've done is they've turned around all of this, we've given them a lot of written questions. They've responded to a lot of written questions. Thank you. And then last week we gave them a lot of questions. And now they've listed them and said, here, these are the questions.
And that'll be coming in the,
Yeah, I'll send that
And
tomorrow.
so
Okay, good.
our job kind of is like, we've asked them a lot of, like, our
Yeah,
job
we
then is
haven't-
to edit the question,
yeah,
say
have we
yes, or
gotten the question
edit the
right? Yeah.
question, have we got the question right? And is there any additional one?
Okay.
My hunch is there not gonna be a lot of additional ones. That's my hunch.
So the-
We did our best.
Good job.
Some questions are more important than others. But I can see, I mean, there's been all kinds of issues and whatever. But you brought up a few issues, to summarize, you got the schedule issue related to zoning.
Hmm.
That hasn't really. been-
Well, we're
but maybe-
meeting,
maybe-
can I comment on that? We're
Yeah.
meeting with the select board and the planning board on the 28th this
Yeah.
month. So we're gonna have an indicator in a different kind of way than just us coming up with some sort of random question on
What,
But at any,
answer to the
it's
question.
a schedule issue, and the way I see it. There was a question about the risk of financing, right? Which took up some discussion last week. There's a question that you clarified today about, well, how is the finance committee gonna react to the previous?
well, they've got this all articulated.
It's
So
all written down on 2
written out.
pages of questions.
It's all written out. All right, so let's get eyes on it. And confirm that those are the questions that we want them asked. If you say, that's fine, but this is not that important, but these three really are for me. Thank you. I'm from, Dave, if that's,
Is that
right?
my instruction?
No, then do that, then that's good. Like, no, I mean, if that's what,
No, I mean, I think we should boil it down, but what's really important here?
It's, what's more important is to get the list turned around to us. If we have a
Yeah,
minor
let's do that.
question, it's easy to
Yeah,
add.
yeah.
One person's minor question is another person's important question.
yeah.
We don't have time to sort that. I'd rather just have the raw list.
Everybody has a bee in their bonnet. Right, that's kind of, all right, so let's,
So
all right, the
I will send
22nd.
out- I'll send out your response tomorrow, and I'll send you guys the question from Jean. So you can send a response,
Okay,
and then
We'll
any
do-
other questions can get to me by the
I'm just
22nd.
gonna tack Jean's question on the end of the list that we sent around, so.
Okay.
yeah.
all right, so now we're done with Margaret, can go home. Thank you,
Thank you.
Margaret, again, thanks. Okay, all right, I didn't, Reg. Is that-
Yep, no, that's good.
All right.
Thank you,
so
Margaret.
now-
Thank you.
thanks, Mark.
Okay,
And Cheryl, yes, you
and
mentioned.
Cheryl, thank you, good seeing you. Okay, so now we're done.
Thank you so much. Cheryl had to cancel an appointment second year
Thank you, Cheryl.
to be here,
Thanks,
so
Cheryl.
Thank
and
you.
we really appreciate it.
Okay,
Nice to see you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
thanks, Mike. So. All right, so discussion on consultant, I think that we're gonna get some information, okay, and maybe we'll have some further information at our next meeting, all right? I think we due diligence questions we've covered. I'm walking through the agenda here. Updates to CPA plan. We have some, we can talk, we have some information from Gene, so if we can look at that next week.
When you're sending that out, I
She'll
guess.
send that,
sometimes it-
okay, and Cecilia, I think we can deal with information being sent out piecemeal. I know it kind of gets, some people don't like it, some people do. You're trying to please everybody. Some people want the whole packet and that in one shot and that's it. But sometimes, I don't mind having pieces of it, but that's.
So I think what I'll do moving forward, and if anybody hates this idea, please tell me, is I'll send it out piecemeal and then either Tuesday or Wednesday before the meeting, I'll send out a packet with everything in one, so this is everything for tonight.
Good idea.
That would be my preference.
Okay.
Okay, because that way I can work and wordsmith and
Yeah.
work on these documents. Okay. And so what I would propose, I think I've given you a kind of a tentative agenda for next week. The only thing I want to add is Stuart Saganor. I want to make him available on March 1 for I'm going to ask him to do the 30-minute. Reg, you weren't on the committee when I brought him in to do, it's usually an hour, but so for the newbies, there's an hour-long webinar.
He's well worthwhile.
Yes, so he'll come in, and so he'll have interesting things to say. I've already talked to him, just a little preview. He'll talk a little bit about his view of the IGR and the latest DOR IGR and what his issues with it, okay? So, but I think it's important for our newer members, Dave, Gene, and Dina have not seen Stuart, and it may be that some of the other members haven't either, okay? So we'll have them just for 30 minutes, okay? Is that okay? Good, makes sense?
Cheryl, I would just, in the interest of disclosure, Cheryl Gossman is on the statewide Community Preservation Council steering committee as a Needham citizen representative.
Right. Okay, I was reminded of that in my conversation with Stuart, okay?
Oh, good.
Oh, yeah, no, oh, yeah, this is Massachusetts, like you get everybody's. Okay, that's it for me.
I came away from tonight's meeting upstairs differently than you. I would be surprised if we got a presentation from Claxton.
I agree with you on that.
So,
I think we should tell them we don't want a presentation.
okay, good, let's continue with this conversation then, because I had to, well, let's, Cecilia
You
is,
there?
but we can have Cecilia speak on
Yeah,
this. What
I'm there.
what are they gonna do? Because I thought that they were gonna make a presentation and then say, we'll be back later.
I think they are up in the air with the presentation, but their intent is most likely to ask for the funding to be considered in the fall instead, because we just won't have responses.
It's not gonna be baked enough, yeah.
Yeah, we
So
won't
then-
know anything more then than we do now.
And then can we, kind of the sense of the committee is, I'm okay with that. That one of the things that they've represented, I'd like to hear this, is we're not gonna ask for any more than $1 million. The
Yeah.
reason that it's important is because we do our
As
planning.
long as they're not in category 3.
What is category 3?
That's the third of the 4 question categories where if they find really nasty stuff there and it
Oh, yeah.
escalates. into
No, that-
I think it wouldn't be CPC eligible anyway, so they might be
well,
capped
maybe.
at
They would
that.
never,
Yeah, right.
never
Yeah,
truck material off that site.
That's
So
4.
that's 4,
Yeah,
That's
category
4,
4.
yeah,
But even 1, 2, and 3 are all similar costs.
yeah. But
So I would like to know that the number from CPC is gonna be $1 million and no more, so that we can do our planning
that I can confirm.
right now.
Yes.
Or, yeah, like, yes,
Yes,
yes.
that was the
yes.
conversation that I had with Public Works and Park and Recreation before tonight.
Okay, then maybe they don't need to show up on the first.
well, and we have a lot to do.
We do.
And I think also it's a question of precedent, you've been around the CPC long enough, and I've been a little longer. You generally discourage having fall town meeting application, but if there's an exceptional reason. And in this case, what I heard is a whole bunch of people, I'm not part of that community. A whole bunch of, my God, the world's coming to an end, we can't do our fields. And they want them, if they're gonna be out this summer, they're gonna want them back next summer, so, I think that it fits,
I agree.
but I wouldn't rush it because they don't have it, it's just not gonna come together that quickly. I'd much rather see an application in August or whatever for fall town meeting.
I agree.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, there you go. Great, okay. All right, so let's have a motion to adjourn.
I move that we adjourn.
I'd like to second that.
Okay, all right, roll call vote, Mr. Barnes,
Yes.
Mr. Germany,
Yes.
Mr. Foster,
All right.
Mr. Harrer,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Okay, thanks.
Good night, all.